The grand ballroom of the Hawthorne Children's Charity Gala shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers as business leaders, celebrities, and donors gathered for the annual fundraising event. At the center of attention was Ethan Brooks, a 34-year-old billionaire, CEO known across the country for transforming a struggling technology company into a global empire. Despite his success, Ethan had a reputation for keeping an emotional distance from everyone. Cameras followed his every step as he greeted guests with polite smiles before taking his seat near the stage. Across the room stood Sarah Collins, a hard-working widowed mother in her early 30s. She had been invited to the gala after her small community charity won a national award for helping struggling families. Beside her was her 6-year-old daughter, Emma, a cheerful little girl wearing a bright red cardigan over a cream dress. Emma had spent the evening watching Ethan kindly speak with children and quietly donate to the charity without seeking attention. During the award ceremony, the host invited several children onto the stage to thank the donors. Instead of walking toward the microphone, Emma suddenly ran across the ballroom toward Ethan. The crowd laughed softly as the little girl stopped in front of the billionaire CEO and gently held his hand. Looking up with innocent eyes, Emma asked in a small voice, "Would you marry my mommy? She's all I have." For a moment, the entire ballroom burst into surprised laughter. Some guests smiled awkwardly while others whispered among themselves. Sarah covered her face in embarrassment and hurried forward, apologizing over and over as tears filled her eyes. Ethan slowly knelt until he was at Emma's eye level. The laughter faded as everyone waited for his response. Instead of smiling politely or brushing the moment aside, he looked at the little girl with kindness and quietly asked, "Tell me, why did you ask me that?" The ballroom fell completely silent. No one expected the billionaire CEO to take the child's question seriously, and Emma's answer was about to change the evening forever. The ballroom remained completely silent as Ethan waited for Emma's answer. The little girl looked down at the floor before softly saying, "Because my mommy cries when she thinks I'm asleep. She says she isn't lonely, but I know she is. And you smiled at every child tonight. I thought maybe you'd smile at her too." Not a single person laughed anymore. Sarah reached Emma, gently holding her shoulders. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to Ethan. "She's just a little girl. She doesn't understand." Her face turned red with embarrassment as she tried to lead Emma away. Ethan calmly stood and said, "Please, there's nothing to apologize for." He looked at Emma and smiled warmly. "Your mommy must be very special if she raised such a brave little girl." The audience watched in silence as Ethan invited Sarah and Emma to join him at a nearby table. For the next half hour, instead of returning to wealthy investors and television cameras, he listened to Sarah's story. She explained how her husband had passed away several years earlier and how she worked 2 jobs while volunteering at a community center that helped struggling families. She admitted life had been difficult, but she never wanted Emma to grow up believing kindness depended on money. Ethan was deeply moved. Unlike many people who approached him because of his fortune, Sarah never asked for help, never mentioned business, and never expected anything in return. She simply thanked him for treating her daughter with respect. As the gala came to an end, Ethan quietly handed Sarah his business card. "I'd like to visit your community center someday," he said. "Not as a CEO, just as someone who wants to help." Sarah smiled politely, believing it was simply a kind gesture. Neither she nor anyone else in the ballroom realized that this unexpected meeting would soon change all 3 of their lives forever. A week after the charity gala, Ethan Brooks arrived at Sarah's community center exactly as he had promised. There were no cameras, no reporters, and no security entourage, just Ethan in a simple navy jacket carrying several boxes of books, school supplies, and toys. The volunteers were surprised to see one of the country's most famous CEOs helping arrange tables, serve lunch, and spend hours talking with children. Emma's face lit up the moment she saw him. "You really came," she shouted, running over to hug him. Ethan laughed warmly. "I promised I would." Throughout the day, he watched Sarah encourage struggling families, comfort frightened children, and organize meals for people in need. She never treated anyone differently. Whether they were wealthy donors or families with nothing, Ethan quietly realized that the greatest leader in the room wasn't the billionaire CEO, It was the single mother who had dedicated her life to helping others. That afternoon, Ethan asked Sarah if she would allow him to sponsor the community center so it could help even more families. Sarah smiled politely but shook her head. "I'll accept your partnership," she said, "but not your charity. If we work together, I want it to be because you believe in our mission, not because you feel sorry for us." Ethan smiled with genuine admiration. "That's exactly why I want to help." Months passed, and together they transformed the small community center into one of the largest family support organizations in the region. More children received meals, more parents found jobs, and hundreds of struggling families found hope again. One evening, while Ethan, Sarah, and Emma were cleaning up after a children's event, Emma looked at them with a mischievous smile and whispered, "So, are you two friends now?" Ethan and Sarah looked at each other and laughed. Neither of them noticed that every volunteer in the room was smiling too, quietly hoping the little girl's innocent wish might someday come true. Nearly a year after the charity gala, the once small community center had become a place of hope for hundreds of families. With Ethan Brooks' support and Sarah Collins's leadership, new classrooms, a medical clinic, and a children's library had been built. Yet despite his wealth, Ethan insisted on volunteering whenever his schedule allowed. To the children, he wasn't the famous billionaire CEO. They simply knew him as Mr. Ethan. One afternoon, the community center celebrated its anniversary with a family gathering. Volunteers, donors, employees, and local families filled the hall with laughter. As everyone enjoyed the celebration, Emma quietly walked onto the small stage holding a handmade drawing. She smiled at the crowd before looking at Ethan. "A long time ago," she said, "I asked Mr. Ethan if he would marry my mommy." Everyone laughed, but he never laughed at me. The room became completely silent. Emma handed Ethan the drawing. It showed 3 people holding hands beneath a bright sun. On the bottom she had written, "My favorite family." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He walked over to Sarah, gently took her hand, and smiled. "Emma was right about one thing," he said softly. "The best things in life happen when we stop being afraid of what other people think." Looking into Sarah's eyes, he continued, "I came here thinking I would help your community. Instead, you and Emma changed my life, Sarah. Would you allow me to spend the rest of my life making both of you smile?" Sarah, overwhelmed with emotion, nodded through happy tears. "Yes." The audience erupted into applause as Emma wrapped her arms around both of them. Months later, their wedding was held in the same ballroom where Emma had first asked her unforgettable question. This time, no one laughed. They stood and applauded as the little girl proudly walked between her mother and Ethan with the biggest smile on her face. As the celebration ended, Ethan looked at Emma and said, "You didn't just ask me a question that day. You gave me the greatest gift of my life." Emma smiled and whispered, "I knew you'd say yes someday."